Thanks, Stephen, for that report from the road. It was great to see you out in God's beautiful creation.
Yeah, thank you. So basically, I mean, what I just want to add to that is, that there is a climate crisis. There is a crisis for creation, and our response is driven by our call to mission, and specifically the fifth mark of mission. We're asking your support for us to take coordinated action to reach net carbon zero by 2030. And the urgency and significance of climate change and the degradation of the environment, I think, cannot be overstated. The UN's IPCC, the International Panel on Climate Change report, has warned that humanity has 11 years to take action in order to prevent global heating above 1.5 degrees centigrade. And above that, the risk to humanity of floods, droughts, and extreme heat becomes significantly greater. There is a separate but linked biodiversity crisis. The world is experiencing rapid extinction of species caused by factors including but not exclusively climate change. And some of you will be aware of this, and I highly recommend watching David Attenborough's series on Netflix if you want to learn more about that. We are called to exercise leadership in this area, prioritizing the fifth mark of mission to strive to safeguard the integrity of creation and to sustain and renew the life on Earth. The work of the task force has included, but not limited to, learning externally about best-in-class approaches to leading change, notably with Bishop Mark Andrus, the Bishop of California. We've developed a simple carbon reduction action guide that Susan Pinnells will share with you momentarily. We've developed a new travel policy for all clergy, staff, and volunteers of the convocation. We've conducted a parish climate and creation care benchmarking exercise. So thanks to all of you who answered the survey. I realized, listening to the other leaders, that there's been a lot of surveys circulated. But thank you to those of you who've answered that. We've been working with Santa Maria Ferrano, and thank you for your vote of including them as a special mission yesterday. But we've been working with them on how they can evolve and be part of the creation care solution for the Episcopal Church in Europe. And we're also working with the team, Bishop Mark Andrus's team. They've created a website called werenew.net. And it's a website in the US that helps individuals engage in practical ways to reduce their carbon footprint. And we're working to figure out a way of bringing that into all of our countries in Europe, not just the translation of that, but also the application of those tools that are relevant to markets in Europe. So in the resolution that we have before you, Resolution 2020-17, that we ask your support for, we call on the Council of Advice to share the guidance with all the communities in the convocation. We call for the creation of a grassroots community of practice composed of at least one person in each of our communities to share ideas, raise awareness, and continue to strengthen our collective climate stewardship. I believe that care for God's creation should not be a topic for just 1 year. The anthropogenic threats to the health of our planet will shape the challenges faced by our children and their children and untold generations to come. The terrible impact on all of us of the COVID-19 pandemic and the injustices revealed in the unequal treatment of racial communities in all parts of our church are surely matters for our attention. But in some ways, they've obscured the reality that our planet is still burning, our storms are becoming more frequent, and the threats to human well-being from changes in the climate are, if anything, more widespread and more severe than the virus. Now, we know that we need to change our behavior to reshape the choices we make in order to do our part. As the members of your task force, we set before you the simple idea that perhaps the most effective way for all of us to be better at being the change we want to see is to begin from the hope we have received and the commitments we have made in our baptism. If we help each other support and keep each other accountable as the stewards we're called to be, we will find that God's power working in us can do infinitely more than we can ask or imagine. Thank you. I realize that was a bit long, but I think it was important to cover the key points. I'd like to ask Susan Pinnells to share with you a tool, because sometimes this can, as I said in my introductory video, it can be a little bit overwhelming. And so what I like about what Susan has developed is it's kind of brings it down to, okay, what does that mean for me? How do I change what I do? And she's developed a kind of a slide that I'll ask her to present now. And it's a very simple how-to guide on reducing your carbon footprint. Susan.
Okay. Well, good morning, everybody from St. Augustine's in Wiesbaden. My contribution to the task force really is at the micro level, and this is work in progress. So I tried to raise the awareness of my home parish, St. Augustine's. I wanted to raise the idea of the whole issue of climate and creation care. So it's small beginnings really at grassroots level. And I started with a presentation asking the question, what can you do to protect the environment? If we could perhaps have the slide with this question come up now. Yes, I just saw it flick by. Can you put that slide up for me with the, yes, that one. Okay, so this slide, it covers a few basics. It covers probably things that you personally are already doing, things in the home, when you go shopping for groceries, the sort of food you buy, what you eat, how you can renew and recycle, a section on travel, and all of this actually applies to what we do in our churches, in our home parishes. So I set up this slide not as a comprehensive list, but as the basics. The list is endless. It goes on and on and on, but it's a good starting point. And if you notice on the top here is a link to tracking your carbon footprint, which some of you might well have done. Okay, so I showed this to my parish at the beginning of September. This was the beginning of the season of creation. So it was quite timely, and I asked them to go through it, to tick off what they were already doing, and to come up with ideas, new ideas. And the overriding motto, which I hope you can see at the bottom there, is basically every little bit counts. And this motto is an attempt to counteract the helplessness that we all feel. So many people say, well, what's the point? What's the point of getting involved? And talking to people in my own parish, I know there's a lot of people that are very cynical and have the feeling it doesn't really matter what you do and what you don't do. So by presenting this to them, I wanted to say every little does count, and you personally can make a difference in your daily habits. You might not be able to change politics, you might not be able to change the practices of big companies, but you can change your own practices. So early September, I asked my parish for volunteers to track their carbon footprint using this link here that's up the top. I also asked at the same time to give me feedback on their personal habits and any ideas that they had that they felt might be new. I must admit the response was very limited. It was a bit disappointing. I did in fact only receive 4 carbon footprints to work with, so I changed my tactics a bit, and then I asked just for feedback. And then I started receiving quite a lot of good ideas. So if we can maybe go on to my next slide, thank you. What I did with these ideas, this feedback, I recycled it into what I've called weekly environmental care tips. That sounds a bit officious, but it's quite harmless actually. They go out to our congregation once a week with the help of Chris Easthill. And I stress in most of them that the idea in it, this week's idea, has actually come from the parish. It wasn't my idea, it was somebody in the parish. It remains anonymous so that they feel that the feedback they're giving me is worthwhile. I just want to give you one example of one of these weekly tips that has had quite a resonance. It's about emails, and that emails do contribute to our carbon footprint. You might not know this, but just in condensed form, an average office worker receives roughly 121 emails a day. Over the year, this can come out to 0.6 tons of CO2e, that's equivalent. So that's quite an addition to your carbon footprint. So the basic message here is take this on board. When this meeting's over, go back to your laptop or your telephone or however you organize your emails, delete your trash, delete your spam mails, go through your inbox, go through your outbooks, delete as much as you can, everything that is not necessary. And by doing so, you've made an amazing saving. So this was the idea of these weekly environmental care tips. Okay, it's very small beginnings, I will agree with you, but we can't change overnight. We have to see it as work in progress. I don't think this task force will be disbanded in a short time. It's something that definitely is ongoing. What I'd like to say is it's important to network with other parishes now. If you'd like to share your experience with us, please email me. I'd welcome any suggestions and tips and good ideas, and perhaps we can set up some kind of network where these things are circulated around all of the churches in our convocation. Okay, so that's just about it from me. Remember, when it's finished, go and sort your emails out. Okay, thank you for listening.
Great. Thank you, Susan. That's great.
We have some questions coming in, and Stephen, go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say well, maybe I'll sort of summarize at the end. I'll take the questions now. Maybe that's the easiest.
Okay,
I can
Susan.
See the questions.
We got a question for you. I'm going to read them to you, Stephen, as they come in.
Yeah.
But this one I think is going to be pretty much for Susan, because we have a question that I must say, I'm feeling guilty. If it's true that emails use energy, I am a really wasteful person because I'm getting way more than 121 emails a day.
Well,
so
just delete them if they're not important.
Well, so can you explain a little bit the connection between the number of emails and the use of energy?
Well, they're all stored, and storage demands electricity. and they're either stored on the cloud or in some of these storage facilities. I have some facts and figures here. They're minimal. It's a minimal amount of energy, but it's in the sum that it adds up. It's the use of everything that we do uses energy, and it's the use of energy. And to continue storing, you need energy. So if you delete your store, you don't need that energy anymore.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
It does. So I think you're telling me I actually have to find that free weekend where I'm going to go through my spam folder and clean out all of the stuff that is just taking up space in there.
And unsubscribe from things that are not important. I mean, I'm a sinner as much as anybody in this respect. I've decided to go through every day and take out 10, 20 emails. It takes like half a minute, no big deal, but it adds up. And that's what I mean by every little bit counts, and might make you feel good too. So that's also important.
Okay, so here's a question, Susan. I'm not sure. Just remember, everybody, Q&A is down at the bottom of the Zoom screen. You can click on it and enter your own questions. See the others that are being posed. Susan, the question is, which is worse, storing things on email or printing the emails?
Well, that's probably bad too. I haven't got any facts and figures to compare that, but basically don't print it out unless you really, really have to, because you're using paper, you're using electricity, and you're using printing ink. So if you don't need to do it, don't do it. Does that answer the question? Okay.
Stephen, can you say a little bit about the travel policy that your task force set before the Council of Advice, and what it means for the convocation and what it might mean for individual parishes?
Yeah, because the two biggest contributions to our carbon output is obviously the heating and lighting of our buildings, and our travel. One of the things that maybe the good things that we've learned from COVID is that it is possible to run meetings remotely. That's not to say that we shouldn't travel at all, but it's now possible for us to reduce the amount of travel that we do and do more virtually. Separate discussion, which we haven't got a lot into because the details of this vary a lot by country, but we're asking for us as a convocation to reach net zero, we're going to need to get every parish into using electricity from renewable resources. So whether that's solar or some other type of renewable energy, we should be switching wherever possible to suppliers who generate it from that source. But the other big carbon contributor is obviously the travel, the physical travel that we do. And so what we're recommending is for us to, really use the train wherever that's possible. And I think the advantages of the train, beyond the fact that the train is 10 times, uses 10 times less carbon than flying, is that you can actually work on a train, and it's much more difficult to work when you're taking the airplane, simply because you seem to spend so much time queuing, either to get on or off or through security or whatever. But our recommendation is basically that wherever possible, wherever practical, we prefer the train for journeys less than 8 hours. So it would be a Rome to Geneva, for example, or a Frankfurt to Paris. Those would be train journeys, not plane journeys.
I'm seeing some questions come in about the mathematics involved in the energy savings realized through the deletion of emails.
Mhm.
And that's, I was a humanities major is what I say to them. But Brian, thank you for that. I might ask you, Brian, to stick that in the chat so others can see it as well. I've just posted in the chat a link to a PDF of the slide that Susan displayed for us so that everybody can have access to it. And that way you can share that in your own parishes as well. The first time I saw it actually was when I made a visitation to Wiesbaden, and it was made available to the congregation on that Sunday. So it's a great little tool. Let me see what else I'm seeing here. Will we have the opportunity to participate online in the next conventions in addition to the in-person gatherings? That is a fabulous question, Nicholas. I think that's a question that we're going to wind up addressing at the Council of Advice. One of the things I think has been really valuable about COVID forcing us to do a virtual convention this year is that it's invited us to reflect on how many more people can participate in the programmatic aspects of convention when we do the thing we're doing right now. And that allows us to do what convention should do, which is to knit the convocation together. So we're going to definitely look into how we can do a hybrid convention in the future and learn from the experience we're having this year. Here's from Mary Haddad. Glad to see food is addressed even marginally. I think this subject is an elephant in the room, or a cow in the room. Mary, okay, good. Imagine that with all of our parish or convocation-wide gatherings, we were to examine what we serve on the table with climate change in mind. That's an excellent point. And Richard Cole asked, are any of our parishes successfully using LED screens to go paperless with service booklets? If yes, how has that worked to be visible, not too distracting, and how has it been received? I don't know the answer to that question. I wonder if somebody who's at a parish with a screen. I was recently in the Church of the Ascension in Munich. There is a large screen in that space. Right now, what it's used to do is to show the faces of those who are participating in the Sunday worship service via Zoom. And I was very pleased to see them included in that way. But it was not showing us the order of service. So that's an interesting possibility to think about. Sunny Hallinan says All Saints Waterloo is using screens and has not experienced an objection. Okay, I'm really trying to catch up with all the questions that are coming in now. Stephen, stand by. Because of COVID, we've missed the Season of Creation project, which I was excited about. I would love our church to be included in Susan's project for a weekly challenge. Okay, we've just shared the little PDF that Susan made available, which, by the way, you don't have to print out. You can just share it digitally with your folk. And Susan, can you come maybe and make a site visit to other parishes? I think if you do, you're going to wind up taking the train. But is that something you're willing to do?
Absolutely, yes. I'd love to. Yes, I'd love to share what I've done with my parish, and I've learned a lot by my mistakes. I think I was asking them to do too much at the beginning, so I've boned that back to a minimum, and I've found that these weekly tips have really increased the feedback that I've got. So yeah, I'd be very happy to share that.
Okay.
So my email's up there somewhere, and just email me and we can network on this one.
And one thing I should just remind us all of, tomorrow when we see formally the resolution that's been set before us by the task force, one of the things they're calling for is the creation of a grassroots network of people, at least one in each of our congregations, who are who are interested in this subject and will be a voice within their communities. We're just raising awareness of these things and sharing new ideas about how we can all reduce our carbon footprint. So think about whether you're that person in your community, whether that would be an interesting ministry for you, and also think about how you can lend your support to that resolution tomorrow. And I'm now desperately trying to catch up with things here. Stephen, a comment here from our colleague Brian Huck in Wiesbaden, who talks about how sometimes it's unavoidable for us to fly when we have to go long distances. But what about advocating for regulations that would make short haul flights really financially unattractive? Either making them sort of, just more costly because of taxes or some other regulatory intervention. Should we be advocating for those kinds of things? Do you have a view on short haul flights?
Yes. Let's say the focus of the team has been on getting our own house in order, in the first instance. So I think there's a lot that we as a convocation can do, in the energy space, in how we think about how we travel. I definitely want to take on this as a kind of advocacy at a broader level in the second phase, and that's why I'm recommending that we continue the work of this task force, because I think there's just so much to be done, including in the area of air travel. And the reason that this is so important is that we're not measuring carbon. I mean, you can buy a flight, on Ryanair or EasyJet. You can buy a flight which costs less than the taxi fare to get you to the airport. So this means that we're not, as a society, we're not looking at, the impact that it's having, the carbon impact or the noise, pollution impact. And I think that's something that we ought to be advocating for.
Along the same lines of advocacy.
I do think, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I do think it's important for us, that we have our own house in order before we start kind of giving lessons to other people.
Okay, on the same line of advocacy, though, here's a question that's just recognizing that the largest sort of wasteful impact on the planet comes from corporations and not individuals. Is there a role for the church in advocating for policies that would rein in the impact of corporations on the environment? I think one thing I might say to that as a first response, and then Stephen and Susan, you may have ideas too. The church itself, through such an entity as the Church Pension Fund, has the ability to influence the choices of corporations where it matters most, which is in a shareholders meeting, because those are the people to whom corporations imagine that they first answer. So we do have a seat at the table when it comes to corporate governance on matters of climate impact. And write to your colleagues at the Church Pension Fund and tell them that you have an interest in this question and you're interested to know how, as investors, the church manages to align its principles with its advocacy as a shareholder. Susan and Stephen, any views on the general subject of advocacy?
No, I fully agree, and which is why we've asked Matt Christensen, as you know, is helping us to develop the ESG strategy. But in the short term, I think the Church Pension Fund is the right place to start. And for those people who are investors, so they can also do that and be advocate in shareholder meetings. There's a lot of this is a subject which is extremely hot right now, and And so corporations are very sensitive to, how shareholders react to this subject. And I know that this is an area where, a lot of leverage can be had with large companies.
I think also it's important to become aware when you invest money, if you invest them in funds or other financial instruments, what that actually means. Often people invest without giving it a second thought. Are they investing in I don't know, in arms dealers, for example? You don't know. And sometimes it's just very, very vague, and it's up to us to promote again awareness at the level of investment, so that we know if we are investing money, what we're actually investing it in, and is it climate friendly?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Can I just add something, changing the subject slightly? I had a remark come up on the chat that something I omitted from my slide was the whole issue of chemicals and cleaning agents, which is true. I did say this was a starting point rather than a full and comprehensive list. This idea of chemicals and cleaning agents was feedback from my parish. And I incorporated that into a weekly email to say, hey guys, go and look in your cleaning closet. How much have you got in there? What chemicals have you got? Do you need all that stuff? Is it friendly to the environment, to your skin, to your health, and so on? So thank you for that. But please don't see that list as by any means covering every area, because it isn't. It's just to sort of kickstart us into awareness, that's all. And please do add to it. I hope that answers that question on the chat. Yeah, that's a good thing for us to keep in mind. And another thing to keep in mind, here's a suggestion from Sunny Hallinan, which is a really good reminder. The moment of COVID, yeah, it's helping us to lower our impact from travel by doing things like meeting together on Zoom, but it's also creating a lot of sudden waste in the form of disposable masks and lots of other things we weren't using before. So just be conscious about how things that we're doing now, because of the way we're adapting to the pandemic, might also be causing us to create more waste than we otherwise would. Mm. Looking quickly through the questions and chat to see if there's more that we need to bring to our attention. Helena, thanks for that reminder that General Convention is often engaged in a conversation about climate impact. Bishop Andrus, who addressed us at APL, is a leader of the Green Bishops, as they're called, and really keeps this in the forefront of our attention at General Convention. And of course, in the United States, there's an advocacy function with the Office of Government Relations that is a little bit different here in our European context, but it is something to keep in mind in your work as a citizen, wherever you are. Looking through the other questions, I think what we've mostly got, oh no, I got a few more. Brian, I don't know about the specifics of the portfolio that CPG has. I do think there's some information publicly available from their website. And if not, we can look into that. Here's a link from Ann Swardson. You can use this link to check your own investments for environmental friendliness and social impact. And if you don't see that in the Q&A, we're also just going to post that in the chat as well so that you get it there. Can I tell more about the Green Bishops? Yeah, sure. Bishops tend to form themselves in advocacy groups around issues that for them speak most deeply to the alignment of their Christian commitments and their commitments as citizens. I'm a part of a thing called Bishops United Against Gun Violence, which does what it says on the label. There's also an informal group known as the Green Bishops. It's been going on for at least 20 years.
My dear friend, Bud Cederholm, who was suffragan bishop in Massachusetts, was one of its founders. It's a group of bishops who are committed to the idea that the church needs always to take into view care for the environment. It's part of our baptismal covenant. It's part of the marks of mission, as Stephen mentioned. And we just always need to be keeping in our conversation and our teaching role as bishops, the idea that we are co-creators with God and given the responsibility of stewardship of the creation. So it's a subject to be taught about, to be prayed about, to be discussed when we come on visits to your church, to ask, what are you doing in terms of being aware of your carbon impact? That's a question often for vestries to address. Junior wardens often have the portfolio for property, and that's their worry. So it's that kind of a group that doesn't. There are very few formal groups among the bishops. We just sort of gather around interest areas. So. I think we're coming to. I think we've done it. I think we've done it. Have we done it? Do you guys, Susan, Stephen, do you have any wrap-up comments you'd like to add?
I think the wrap-up comment would be that, you know, we would like this committee to continue this task force to continue its work. I don't think the work is complete. We want to embed climate stewardship in the parishes and at the convocation level. We'd like to do an annual audit, you know, of our carbon footprint. We'd like to create this climate stewardship, you know, leaders network in each of the parishes. And we want to do the ESG investment pilot, so we learn how to manage our investments better. So there's a number of priorities that we have for next year. And so, you know, with your support and the support of all of you, we would like to continue doing our work next year.
I'd just like to mention that at some stage further down the line, it will be worth talking about carbon offsetting projects that we can do either as individual churches or, better still, across the convocation. That will be something that perhaps we could talk about next year.
It'd be great, and I can imagine that the group of grassroots leaders at the congregational level that you've identified as a goal for us could be the very place where we organize that kind of effort across the convocation.
Yeah.
Dear friends, thank you so much for your work in keeping this issue before us and for your leadership in giving us ways of actually figuring out things we can do in a practical way to lower our impact and be better stewards of the creation. Thank you on behalf of the convocation for the work you've done. Your report is available to everybody, and Stephen, especially for that wonderful video of you on the road. I just love it every time I see it.